All right, so one of the most common questions is why can't we use our own project management tool like commonly like Asana or GitHub issues, GitLab issues, or something like Jira tickets or so, which I personally hate the most because Jira is like catastrophically bad software, but people still like to use it. And regardless, let's not get off topic here. The point being is generally people tend to think, okay, great, we can just use our own tools for this, customize them a bit, and we have the same as compared to using regulatory software, which is meant to be used for this. And that's a fair point to make. So personally, I actually think by now, with the features we have in Formwork right now, it's very hard to replicate in other tools, but I'll show you the few things which I mean, and then you can actually come up with your own assessment of whether you think, well, this Formwork regulatory tool makes sense, or you should be rolling your own tool. All right, so the first thing is when you look at the QMS, you have documents and records. Again, this is our own QMS, so there's actually quite a bit of content in here, but that's also why I'm allowed to show it because it's our own QMS. And to be honest with you, like this is literally just like a Google Drive with less features, right? Like that's what I call it in demos. It's like Google Drive. You get like folders, you get like documents, but that's kind of like about it. You have like this nice rich text editor where you can like create documents, and that's kind of cool. But there's really not that much to it. But there's like one thing which other text editors and even like Google Docs don't have, which is well, actually, there are two things, which is like compliant electronic signatures and perfect versioning. And we have both of those things, and those are super hard to replicate. I'll show you super briefly. So we have this draft here, and then it says like, hey, you can send it for review. Cool. So let's send it for review. And then now you see, hey, I have to actually re-enter my credentials to actually create a like compliant electronic signature, in this case as the creator of the document. Then I can send it out to reviewers, for example, to the CEO, which is me again, and then send it out for review. And then that person also has to like do electronic signatures. And then once that's done, you can scroll down to the bottom, and at the bottom here, you can see who created it and who reviewed it. And that's something you don't get in other tools typically. You always have to bolt it on top with something like DocuSign, which I personally think sucks too, or any other third-party tool, which I also think is not a great solution. All right, so that's the first thing which I wanted to show you. So compliant electronic signatures, you don't get that in other tools. Second thing is versioning. So let me actually show you a document which has multiple versions. This one's a good one. So you can see actually in this overview, we already get the super intuitive overview, which says like, hey, look at this change management SOP has version 4, which is approved, but it also has version 5, which is a draft. Cool. So we can go to the approved version, and we can also navigate to old versions here. And again, open this old version, and then you get this outdated warning because it's an outdated document. But that's not my point. My point is we can see old versions of documents, and that's something you don't even really get in Google Docs. You do have like a change history and actually a more granular change history, but can you really kind of like go back in time for like entire documents and say like, hey, this was the document we signed, like version 3 of the document? You probably can't, or it's super hard. You end up copy pasting a document a lot, and you might even lose this change history. So that's the second thing. Those are the two things which I think you miss with other tools when it comes to document and record control. And then I'd like to show you a few more things which are, in my opinion, even the most relevant ones when it comes to requirements management. So that's the tech doc section in Formwork, which is something slightly different than the document and record control we looked at earlier. So the technical documentation section here in Formwork is about documenting something called your software requirements specification. So what do I mean by that is you need to document like a list of things which describes your software, kind of. So you end up with a list of things which ends up being a list of features. All right, so far so good. But now the regulatory requirement is you need this list of features. You could literally just do this in like a spreadsheet, right? You could create a spreadsheet, and actually our templates have tables for this, our free templates on our website, where you just like list one feature below the other, and each feature gets a unique ID and so on and so on. Now the problem here is that each of these features here, it is related to other things. So if we look at this feature, you can see, regardless of the title and description, you can see it's related to stakeholder requirements. It's related to failure modes. In this case, it doesn't have any. We can actually add one here. It's related to software tests, and it's related to risk controls. So that's the first thing. Like you need these many-to-many relations. And how would you implement that in another tool? like in, I don't know, I know Asana like a bit, or like Basecamp I know pretty well, it'll be very difficult because you would need to like create custom ticket types or issue types for each of these things. Like you would need to create a custom ticket for like software requirements, which has certain fields, custom ticket type for stakeholder requirements, which has other certain fields. And each of these like ticket types would need to be would need to have different relations. I think that's still doable. It'll be like a whole bunch of work because we have like a lot of subtleties in here. Like for example, we actually have the entire 6304 categories list in here, which you would have to like replicate, but it's not like the end of the world. You could still get it done. But like I think the one killer feature which is extremely hard to replicate in any other tool is versioning across requirements. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I create this the software requirement, well, it already exists. You can see we're actually right now editing version 0.3 of the software. So this is version 0.3 of the medical device software. And now the cool thing is we can actually go back in history. We can see, I'll just move my video away here. You can actually see, check it out, this requirement already existed in version 0.2 and version 0.1. In version 0.1 of the software, it has been added. That was the first time it surfaced. And in subsequent versions, it was modified. And that's something you don't get in other tools. You don't have like versioning of a ticket. You can't observe a ticket or requirement or an issue in GitHub over time. And the next killer feature is we also have the version list over time, right? So you can say, okay, this is the list of software requirements for version 0.3, great. And now if an auditor comes ahead and says, hey, show me the list of software requirements for the past version, or maybe even the first version of the product, and in Formwork, you can say, yeah, that's very easy. Just go to version 0.1, navigate to software requirements again, and check it out. This is the version, this is the list of software requirements for version 0.1. And if you click each of these requirements, you see the content it had in version 0.1. And that's something which is incredibly hard in other tools. Like in other tools which have a user interface, you can do this maybe in a Git repository, but then all your like tickets become markdown documents, and then you run into this problem that now linking these to other things is super hard because you're maintaining like text links in tables. So that's like those are the biggest reasons why I think Formwork is super beneficial over other tools or building something yourself. And the final one thing which I really like personally a lot is our audit export. And you can just export it as a spreadsheet with all the right columns and all the right relations which auditors expect when you hand in your technical documentation. So let's go ahead and actually export this and export something else too. And I want to export the traceability matrices. And that's also maybe, even though you thought I was finished, but I'm not finished, I have one more thing, which is the exportability of things, right? If you, for example, do your requirements in GitHub with GitHub issues, you can't even export GitHub issues, right? It's not possible. You have to write your own API client to fetch those things and build a PDF. It's super messy, right? Like Google Drive, you can probably like export other tools. Jira, it has like some crappy export functionality, but I mean, that's about it. So that's a big problem because for auditors, you have to hand in things as well, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, or PDFs. Anything else will be very hard. So the cool thing about Formwork is it automatically exports everything just in the right format. Again, you can roll this in your own tool, but then the question for you will be, do you want to be suddenly developing your own regulatory tool, or do you actually want to develop your product? Personally, I think developing your product makes more sense. So, oh, by the way, we exported the specification for version 1 of the software, but you get the idea. So you see like the software requirements are listed here, the description is here, stakeholder requirement IDs are here, so the many-to-many links, software test IDs are here. And at that time, the software is very simple. It didn't have any failure modes or risk control IDs. But the point being here is you get an automatic export. And something here which auditors also like a lot is like you get this traceability export. So let me show you what I mean by that. So you get this traceability matrix, which in this case is a very simple matrix of every requirement to every other requirement it may relate to. So you can see the traceability from which software requirements are covered by which stakeholder requirements, or vice versa, which stakeholder requirements are implemented by which software requirements. You can actually see in this case, we have one stakeholder requirement, which is implemented by both software requirements. So this is a very simple example. You also have this with software tests. For example, software test 1 only covers software requirement 1, and software requirement 2 is not covered by a test right now, so an auditor would think like, oh, this may be a bad situation, but that's beside the point. The point I'm making is you do get these traceability matrices automatically generated in Formwork, and in all other tools, you would have to generate these yourself. So I think that's a huge win. All right, so those are the most important parts what I wanted to just like throw over the fence to you, and now you can make up your own mind if you think this warrants using Formwork or any other regulatory tool which doesn't suck. I don't know any on the market for your company, or whether to roll your own tool and like take something off the shelf and customize it yourself. All right, if you have any questions, you'll find a contact form somewhere on our website, but otherwise I hope this video was helpful for you and good luck choosing your tool.